A slow and painful death, and the already strained economy is not making things any easier. Some publications have been forced to shut down, others have had to let go of some employees. While Audit Bureau of Circulation's data shows daily newspaper circulation is down by 40%. It says COVID-19 might be blamed for the decline in sales, but the death of the print industry is not new or unique to South Africa.
Our next discussion is all about the future of print media and whether it looks bleak or not. Some newspapers are closing shop. Others are reducing their circulation, and they're opting in favor of digital sites. Media24 announcing the closure of some of its print newspapers, including the Daily Sun and City Press this past week. Earlier this year, announcing the closure of Laduma and Beeld. So these platforms are now moving to digital.
Hi, darling. Welcome back. Newspapers and magazines have been the longest standing form of media throughout South Africa. From the earliest newspaper recorded in the 1800s, newspapers and magazines are part of our memory, collective memory, and any person who has grew up from the 60s till the early 2000s, I believe, recalls seeing a magazine or a newspaper at home. I have steadily seen, unfortunately, a decline in print media in South Africa and also in the global landscape. And this worries me. This worries me because if media, print media in particular, is steadily experiencing its death, what does this mean for the kids who grew up in small towns like myself, small towns, rural areas and townships, whereby not everyone has access to the internet, not everyone has fiber or Wi-Fi? What happens to information distribution when things like print media are on the decline? I want us to have a balanced discussion on this topic. Obviously, digital media has absolutely dominated the current climate, and it has its own advantages and disadvantages. The same goes for print media, which has its own issues and its own positive basically features. What I want us to do before I get into this breakdown, I want us to quickly go through the admin stuff. I want us to go through the advantages and the disadvantages of both print media and digital media, and then I will add my breakdown. But before we get into that, I want to read a quote for you. The quote is from James Baldwin, and it reads, "Anyone who has ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor." I will explain why I chose this particular quote for this video at the end of this video. Let's go through the advantages of obviously the digital space or digital media. The advantages of digital media is that it is very much instant updates in real time. It is basically more eco-friendly, so no paper. It also is more democratic in the sense that more people now get the opportunity to create information or disperse information through social media and online platforms. And because of digital media, you are able to reach a wider audience or cast a wider net through your post, and you have more global access. So that is one of the things that I've noted about digital media. Some of the disadvantages, though, is, let's be honest, digital media is impermanent. Digital media is hard, especially with the current political climate. Right now, we are at an interesting time whereby we are seeing right-leaning bots that are spreading a certain narrative on digital platforms, which speaks to this disadvantage of digital media, is the fact that misinformation, there is a lot of misinformation, and it's easy to delete and alter whatever information is dispersed to people. Digital media is also very much dependent on you having an access to the internet, and it also exposes you to a degree to data tracking. So I'm pretty sure we all know that sometimes you go to a shop on your phone, and you realize all of a sudden you're getting basically ads and ads related to that particular shop. It's because they're already tracking your data. So there's a lot of tracking, there's a lot of data breaches that happen with digital media. Digital media is also behind a paywall. Let's be honest, nobody likes subscribing, especially as our current economic system is. Nobody wants to have a subscription that takes money from them in South Africa. Right now, the current model of digital media or newspapers from years ago, they've either been closed completely or they are moving digitally, and everything is behind a paywall. There is a YouTuber that I watch occasionally, Zimasa, if I'm correct. I want us to look at this video, and it basically tells the story briefly about why paywalls are not good, especially for media.
So here's something interesting. The South African news industry is facing cash flow challenges that have meant that they now need to evolve possibly sooner than what they were ready for. But some who lead the way are shaping the next chapter of how South Africans will access their news. But at what cost? News24, a company owned by Media24 and by extension Naspers, continues to dominate South Africa's publishing landscape with 161 million monthly page views and 730,000 plus daily visitors. But on the other side, an opportunity has presented itself for alternative, credible media to exist, like even platforms like this. See, the thing is that News24 and many other news houses are selling opinions on stories and not the stories themselves. And for a very long time now, they have told people how to react to stories that happened around them. I mean, how many times have you seen journalistic prejudice from mainstream publications around how they cover various topics? It's now even a thematic that when you don't see the name or the face of the accused person, they're likely white. And when you see the accused person, they're black. And then the media will hide behind terms like public interest versus the right to privacy.
What about the advantages of print media? The advantages of print media is that it is unchangeable. It is a fixed, tangible thing. It is also more credible. What do I mean that print media is more credible? Because if you think about the process of creating a magazine, creating a newspaper, it goes through different fact checking, it goes through editors, it's a rigorous process. It also is very much not dependent on the internet. So you don't need the internet to access a magazine or a newspaper that is in print. Also, it is more easier to retain information when you are using a tangible book. I don't know what is it about being able to touch, being able to smell a book that helps human beings retain information. I even tried to dispute this myself because I feel like reading books, you're able to have more deeper information or comprehension retention. And even the studies, I've looked through the internet to find studies that dispute this. The studies are actually proving me correct. A lot of the studies that I found prove that paper or print media helps a lot. There is more positive in terms of if someone you want to read information, you're able to retain more information. And I think that is because of there's no ads, there's no pop-ups, Whereas on digital media, you are distracted a lot. There is a lot of skimming. And I think it might also do something, it might have to do something with the fact that if you're using digital media, you're on a screen. There's something about looking at a screen for a long time that is just tiring to the eyes. So I think it is those issues, but let's not forget, print media also has its own disadvantages. One of the disadvantages that I've noticed about print media is that it is bulky, it is inconvenient. Nobody wants to carry around a newspaper. Nobody, like, it's more convenient. If you had to choose magazine or your phone, you'd choose your phone. It's just more convenient than to lug around a newspaper. It's also just more expensive to produce. Producing a newspaper, producing a print magazine is more expensive to make and to distribute. It's also not the most environmentally friendly process because you are obviously using a lot of paper, you're using a lot of trees to create that kind of media. Let me know in the comment section. I know that there's definitely some other aspects or advantages and drawbacks that I might have missed when it comes to digital media and print media. I'm sure some of you are asking, why is this important? Why are you advocating for print media? I'm not advocating for the complete move away from digital media. Obviously not. Digital media has its own space. Like digital media, let's be honest, it's very stimulating. You have many more options. You can have audio, you can have video, you can have images that are moving like GIFs. You just have more different forms of multimedia when it comes to digital media. Whereas I feel like books, magazines, print, they stimulate your sense of smell, smelling the book, looking at the book, being able to touch it, see it, feel it. It's a very different experience. What I'm saying is both have a place in the landscape of information production, but I think there are key issues that I'm worried about as we move on to the digital space. I have an argument that is, we need print media. Print media is almost like a historical relic. It's almost a historical artifact that documents basically the journey of our lives, the stories of a country, the stories of the world. I will even go far as to say, if we didn't have artifacts such as carvings on stone and carvings on mountains and caves, things like the Bible or the Quran wouldn't exist because they are relics. The information that is on the Bible, the information that's on most religious text or spiritual text comes from historical records, comes from artifacts. So how does that relate to print media? A lot of our history, a lot of our culture is documented through print media, and I don't think it would be fair to neglect that aspect. Print media did have its own propaganda, but one thing I will always appreciate about it is that print media went through rigorous processes. There were multiple people that were consulted before you released something, before an article, before news were disseminated. No matter how slow that process was, there was a level of integrity in the journalism. Whereas now, you can create fake stories. Like what's happening currently in South Africa is controlled by the digital space. You can get actual AI bots to create a narrative about South Africa or create a narrative to fit into a certain storyline. The storyline of South Africa being increasingly dangerous or genocidal. There's so much of those issues that can be basically altered and created just through digital platforms. So I do feel like we do need print media to be maintained to some degree. We need a balance. I know some magazines like Bona. Bona has been able to adapt through digital to be digital and also physical. Those are examples of what could be the possibilities. But I also worry, going back to my initial story, for me, I went to a township school, I went to a government school. And whenever I hear that everything is becoming digital, I'm thinking of all the children who are in rural parts of South Africa who don't have access to instant information and don't have access to the English language as easily or an expansive vocabulary. I worry because for me, that's how I learned how to speak English. That's how I learned how to expand or get more and collect more words, basically just create an entire gallery for myself was through newspapers. I learned how to spell a lot of things because I would take the newspaper from my dad, and it really helped. So I'm thinking about how can we integrate the kids who don't have access to the internet, the kids in the rural areas? How do we not neglect that part of the country? And print media has that ability, as slow-paced as it is, as old school, old-fashioned as it is. I think artifacts, being able to maintain physical things is necessary. Everything doesn't have to be digital. We can have digital, but we also need something real, something tangible. And I worry when everything can be deleted at the click of a hand. Like, you can just delete everything because these platforms are owned by people. What if Elon decides to delete Twitter, or X? Everything is gone. So it's like print is necessary, I think, but I don't think it should be in high production like it used to be. I think we can have a balance of print and a balance of digital. Darlings, if you go throughout history, everything is recorded. Everything is in some kind of record. Every culture has some kind of record, whether that be the hieroglyphics, whether that be the Asian script, the written Asian script. Those are historical artifacts. Even writing, even a newspaper, an old school newspaper, is a historical artifact. It is a collection of memory. It is a depiction of where we've come from or where we are going. I'm talking about the need to preserve print media because it curates culture. It's part of our culture. It also is just good to have sometimes the opportunity to log out and actually be in the physical world. I know social media dominates everything. Our news, everything is from the online, but you also do need time to come back to reality. I think of the issues. What will happen if we don't have print media? What could be the drawbacks of print media? We're already seeing it. History is being rewritten through social media platforms. You can falsify, you can create images that spread a certain narrative.
An artifact found in Africa can never belong to Britain in any way.
These artifacts, who do they belong to? They belong to the museums where they are now.
Where do Africa's treasures belong?
They belong to the museums where they are now.
Now imagine this headline differently. Imagine if it said, where do Germany's treasures belong?
For centuries, Africa has endured the heartbreaking loss of its invaluable artifacts, stripped away by colonial powers and collectors driven by greed. These stolen treasures, imbued with immense cultural and spiritual significance, represent the very essence of African heritage.
Locked up the precious legacy of 1 million people, and they reject all demands to return any of it. So by holding on to them and displaying them for a fee. Western museums are still benefiting from their colonial legacy, still validating their historical wrongs and injustices.
I love the Benin bronzes. I think that they properly reside in the British Museum.
Their empires have crumbled, but their sense of entitlement has not.
They belong to the museums where they are now.
So, if we look at these artifacts that disappeared from West Africa, from the rest of Africa, some were obviously destroyed. Artifacts have the ability to tell your history. You can know your history. We wouldn't know the pyramids of Giza without the pyramids of Giza. We wouldn't know China somehow without the Great Wall of China. These are artifacts that tell the history of a place. Even paper, even written paper, even books tell history. And my worry is that if everything becomes digital, everything is liable or everything is vulnerable to alteration. History can be rewritten and reshaped through the click of a button. That is my worry if we only move to digital spaces and there's no actual print media like magazines and newspapers. I know I've accepted that the death of the newspaper and the magazine is very much a reality now, with some newspapers still driving, of course, but I'm very much aware. And I have an idea, a recommendation. I think instead of printing things, like every month, we could have a yearly recollection, a newspaper or a magazine. I think a magazine is more stable. A magazine that collects all the stories, all the highlights of the years in our country and puts them into a magazine, almost like a highlight reel, but in physical copy that documents some of the things or the highlights that have happened in our country for the whole year. That is just a suggestion of how I could see print media being able to still be viable, because it will be recording our history. It will also have editors and fact checkers. It will have quality over quantity. We need to balance the scales. Right now we have quantity. We have way more people disseminating information without properly fact checking than quality. There's more quantity of information. So something to think about. So why did I quote James Baldwin in the beginning of the video? This quote by James Baldwin talks about how expensive it is to be poor. And right now, as things become digital, as information becomes digital, libraries are obviously closing down and everything. The question is, what happens to the people who cannot afford Wi-Fi, the people who cannot afford data in South Africa? We know data is expensive, ridiculously expensive. How are we going to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to gain information, actually good information, not just these articles that are there to trigger or garner sensational views and stuff like that? I wonder, how can we incorporate people who don't have access to phones? Some people don't have phones. As much as you think, because you have a cell phone, you think everyone has a cell phone. Some people don't. And I worry, because I was one of those people. I didn't grow up with internet at home. I didn't grow up with Wi-Fi or all these things. And not everyone has money. I worry about the people who don't know where to apply for jobs, because newspapers used to post jobs. Newspapers used to post information about universities. What happens when you are completely isolated from the digital space? Something to think about. So darling, if you watched this video from beginning till the end, please leave a book emoji in the comment section. And I'm looking forward to hearing what is your opinion when it comes to print media or the death of print media in South Africa. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.